I've played a video game. I've played it quite a lot actually. At least once a year, every year since I was a teenager, I've played through the original Legend of Zelda on the NES. It is, by a pretty large margin, my favourite game of all time. Now don't get that twisted, I definitely don't think it's the best game of all time. It'd be quite a damning indictment of gaming as a medium if the best example of it was made 35 years ago, and we hadn't advanced since. But for reasons of comfort, nostalgia and genuinely good game design, more on that later, the original Zelda tops my list of favourite games ever. So given that the 35th anniversary is coming up on the 21st of February, I thought I'd take this year's playthrough and ramble over the top of it, because there's a few things about this game that I've always wanted to talk about. Let's talk game design. This is the title screen. You can tell because it's a screen with a title on it. Here you get the famous and iconic Zelda theme that's stuck around for longer than I've been alive. Before the screen fades to black and starts to scroll some important information. Ganon has stolen the Triforce. Oh no, who could have foreseen this unforeseeable happenstance? Well, as it turns out, nobody, because it hadn't happened yet. Then we get a quick summary of items you're going to need to know about and a pretty visible and obvious prompt to read the manual. This game came out in 1986, and for the younger among you I'll just explain that games used to come with books. Sometimes thin little pamphlets, sometimes literal books, and those books or manuals explain things like controls, backstory, lore, tips, and other things you might need to know. Zelda's manual took the place of what these days would instead be a tutorial, walking you step by step through starting the game, getting to the first dungeon, and everything in between. And the reason that I mention this is that some people will try and tell you that The Legend of Zelda was an obtuse and confusing game that deliberately hid things from you to make you call a premium rate tips line or buy a strategy guide. Neither of those things are true. Those people just weren't paying attention. Now, pay attention. This little text scroll you just watched happens to finish and boot back to the title screen at exactly the point when the main theme naturally reaches the end. Is that important? No, not really, but it's one of many things that highlights how much attention to detail and to design went into some of Nintendo's early and most legendary projects. Next we're putting in our name, which is nothing revolutionary, except of course it is because The Legend of Zelda is the first ever home console game to let you save your progress. It had a battery inside the cartridge which would later become standard, until the introduction of memory cards and later on, onboard storage. So for now, yes, even putting in your name is a revolution. I'm sorry, but Nintendo really did invent everything. And then finally the game starts. This is what you're presented with, a kind of beige floor with some green rocks, 3 directions to go in and a cave. You can, if you want, wander off without any weaponry whatsoever and die, but I wouldn't recommend it. Instead we're going into this cave, which has been given a spot on screen as the only important thing you should be paying attention to, so that you don't miss it. Inside is an old man who will offer you a stick. It's a brown wooden sword, about as useful as a twig, but it's better than wandering off with nothing at all and dying. Marginally. Now again, we can, if we want, wander off and explore most of the world. And if we do, we'll probably run into something we can't deal with right now and die. Would you believe me if I said that this is both okay and in fact intentional? You'll notice that we have 3 hearts. If you die in The Legend of Zelda, you always come back with 3 hearts. 3 hearts is enough to get you anywhere as long as you're good at dodging. And at the beginning of the game, it's enough to fill up every heart container you have. Why is this important? Because when your health is full, your sword will shoot a beam of energy across the entire screen. It's a little incentive to try and stay at full health, and it evens the playing field with some of the enemies, many of whom will have projectile attacks. Starting you off with 3 hearts, which are always full when you die, is the game's way of telling you that it's alright to go off and explore, because if you die you won't lose anything. You'll come back at the same strength, rejuvenated and as powered up as you can be at this point, so go off and explore and die over and over until you're ready to move forward. We don't need to do that though, because over the course of 30 years I've more or less memorised the entire map, so instead we're going to head straight to level 1. Along the way we'll meet some Octoroks, these octopus-like things that spit rocks.
Oh boy, I'm so hungry I could eat an Octorok!
As well as some levers and even a Zora. Yes folks, even the magnificent Prince Sidon started life looking like this. You'll notice as we go that I'm killing more or less everything, because occasionally enemies drop rupees. A guiding principle of the first Zelda is that cash rules everything around me, so we'll be doing a lot of work to acquire as many rupees as we can, for reasons I'll get into later. A few screens away from the start you'll find this bridge over the sea, which is a unique landmark in the game and never appears anywhere else, which is how you know it's important. If you're following the guide in the manual, that'll have already led you here, because the game wants you to know where you're going as long as you pay attention. Follow the bridge and you'll find a tree with a hole in it which serves as the first dungeon. I wonder where we've seen that before, or will see that before? Time for a pro tip. Go into the dungeon and look at the first room. See that door there? It's locked. So go outside again, then come back in, and voila, the door is now magically open. Why is this important? Because uniquely to The Legend of Zelda, keys are universal and work on any locked door in any dungeon. So when you can save one, you should. You can even buy them in the shops if you want. This isn't really relevant to us right now because I've committed every dungeon layout to memory, and I know which doors are worth opening. But it's worth pointing out because at any point, if you're really stuck, you can just go to a shop and buy a key, because this game isn't as impenetrably confusing as some people would lead you to believe. The first dungeon is of course nothing special. You're only going to have 3 hearts while you're here, so it can't be too difficult. Inside you'll get enemies like Keese and some Stalfos, some Gel and Degoria, which will throw boomerangs at your face. While we're here, I can show you this item. It's a stopwatch. It wouldn't appear again in the Zelda series until Hyrule Warriors, possibly because it's massively overpowered. Pick it up, and every enemy on screen will freeze in place, and you'll become invincible. Now this is balanced by the fact that it usually drops from the last 1 or 2 enemies, and I don't know whether that's intentional, or whether the game just hates you. Level 1 also introduces us to the revolutionary concept of pushing a block to do things, which would become a mainstay puzzle mechanic for the series. In this case, it opens up a door, where an old man hiding in a dungeon tells us the eastmost peninsula is the secret. You'll see a fair few helpful messages like this throughout the game, and some of them are more directly obvious than others because of some quite questionable translation choices, but they will all give you some clue as to what you ought to be doing. This one requires you to know what a peninsula is, i.e. a piece of land almost entirely surrounded by water, and then tells you to go to the one furthest to the east. What does this mean? It means there's something secret over to the east, obviously. It's not as complicated as it sounds, is it? You just need to pay attention. Anyway, you'll soon come across the map, which shows you a full layout of the dungeon. The dungeons in The Legend of Zelda all have names, and the first one is known as the Eagle. See? It looks like an eagle, sort of. In this section, you'll notice that I'm stood between 2 grid lines on the ground while I attack these enemies. Here's a teachable moment about how brilliant Zelda's movement is. The game screen is clearly divided up into a grid of squares, which are 16 pixels wide. Any enemies that move in this game have to move along this grid, with the exception of those that can either jump or fly, meaning they can't stop in between squares. Link, however, can. He actually moves on a larger grid with smaller squares which are 8 pixels wide, which means in combat you can strategically position yourself to outmaneuver your enemies, and we'll have some direct examples later on. Little side note while we're on movement, as you're watching this video you'll notice that Link never snags himself on anything. He never gets stuck or clips off a hard edge. There's a couple of reasons for this. One is that obviously most things have sort of rounded off edges. The bushes are a good example, and you'll kind of smoothly roll around the outside if you're going to collide with them. But something even deeper, more subtle and more brilliant than that is happening underneath. Like we've already covered, Link moves on a grid, but he doesn't jump from square to square like you'd expect him to. He can move anywhere for as long as he likes. He can stop wherever he wants, turn around, and occupy any pixel on screen that isn't a wall or an obstacle. But how can this be if he's moving on a grid? What's happening is that although you can move wherever you want, if you fall out of alignment with that grid, the game will slowly and silently pull you towards your nearest aligning grid line, 1 pixel per frame, for as long as you're moving. You'd never notice, but it means the game can always keep you roughly in line and stop you from running into things. If you add all this together, it means Link has almost perfect 360-degree movement over the entire screen, while his enemies are generally stuck moving in 4 directions, on a big, thick, obvious grid. So even when things get tough, you've always got a movement advantage in combat, because this game is brilliant. Anyway, back to level 1. Carry on with the logical path and you'll find a staircase blocked off by some, blocks. Down there, you'll retrieve the bow. Thus begins the legacy of hiding an important item in a dungeon, but we're not going to be using the bow for a while, so I guess just remember that we picked it up. Level 1 isn't done giving up goodies though, and in this room here you'll find something really random. Clear out this lot and a boomerang will just magically appear in front of you. It's not locked away in a secret room, it's nowhere important, it's just there. The reason for that is that originally when the game was in development, the old man in the cave at the start would have given you 2 choices, either the sword or the boomerang. 35 years later we might have been expected to save Hyrule with the Master Boomerang, which gives the whole thing a sort of Australian twang. So after having decided to just give you a sword instead, they had to put the boomerang somewhere, and so it's here. It's reasonably useful if you're not at full health, since it will let you stun enemies so you can mash them up close with a sword. In this room you'll notice a couple of things. One, there are wall masters coming out of, well, the wall. If they grab you, they'll carry you all the way back to the start of the dungeon. Not that big a deal in level 1, rage-worthy later on. If you pay attention, you'll also hear a kind of digitized roaring noise in the background. This tells you that you're in a room adjacent to the boss, and is useful in later dungeons when you're trying to figure out where you're meant to be going. The boss of level 1 is Aqua Mentus, a dragon that only ever appears again in Oracle of Seasons, and as far as I know has never been in 3D, which is a bit sad. He spits fireballs, and if you're at full health you can just stand on the far left of the screen and shoot sword beams at his face. Lovely. Grab your heart container, get to the next room, pick up the piece of the Triforce of Wisdom, and you're finally done with the first level of The Legend of Zelda. There, that wasn't so hard, was it? Now to do that 8 more times. Easy. From here, we could go straight to level 2, a dungeon that, by the way, the manual still tells you how to get to, because this game isn't confusing if you just pay attention. But we're not going to do that, because first we need some stuff. Regular series fans will know that Link's greatest strength is acquiring things. Swords, items, upgrades, bottles, you know, things. And that goes all the way back to the first game. So we're going to go and get us some things. First, we're going to take a quick trip through the desert, because Zelda has always had a variety of landscapes for you to wander around in. This screen here introduces Tektites, little hoppy bug things that I used to think had eyes here and a mouth here, rather than the one massive eye they clearly have, because I was a dumb child. See this rock? Big old boulder taking up the entirety of a screen on its own? Bit suspicious, isn't it? And this is what I mean when I say you need to pay attention. You see a big rock stood on its own in the middle of the screen, you've got to think something strange. Rocks like this don't exist just anywhere, and there's only one other example of it in the entire game, which we'll get to later. So if it looks suspicious, there must be something up with it. Now, using your logical brain, given the tools at your disposal, what would you do? What is logically a good way to explore giant rocks? That's right, explosives. We happened to pick up some bombs in the first dungeon, so we'll just drop one down here, and oh look, it opened up. We've discovered a secret, and we used logic and intuition to figure it out. Aren't we clever? Keep that in mind, it'll come in handy later. Inside, an old man offers us a chance to take any one we want. We'll get to the potion on the left later, but all you need to know for now is it's a dumb, ridiculous, stupid choice that nobody should ever make, because it's a consumable item that will vanish after 2 uses. What we're interested in is the heart container, which permanently extends our available health. We'll have a couple more choices like this, and you're always going to want the heart container, because later on you'll be able to just buy potions anyway. Like I said, cash rules everything around me. So now that we've upgraded our health a bit, we can carry on to level 2, right? No, don't be silly. Instead, let's head over to the ocean shore, where you'll get a neat little wind effect in the background to let you know that you're at the beach, since we couldn't do little ice cream stands and sun lounges in 1986. Our destination is to the north, up into the mountains, up a single staircase in a lone cave at the top. There, an old man asks us to take his letter and show it to the old woman. One of the biggest mysteries in the Zelda series is what's on this letter. Could it be the stubborn old man's declaration of love and affection? Could it be a receipt for an eBay purchase? Is he trying to slide into her DMs in the 80s before a DM was even a thing? Who knows? But sure, we'll take it, kicking off a series worth of fetch quests and deliveries to obtain useful things. While we're here though, let's head east to this dead end with a tree in it. We're not interested in the tree itself. At this point, I know all the hints you can acquire off by heart. I can remember those even if I can't remember my PIN number sometimes, because brains are strange. Instead, we're going to press up against this wall and, oh my gosh, a secret cave. And inside, we'll find a moblin. Moblins are usually enemies, but this one seems to be more of a conscientious objector and offers us 100 rupees, presumably to keep our mouth shut about where he's hiding. I know what you're thinking. If the game's not confusing and obtuse, how the hell are you meant to know where that is? Easy. First of all, it's an optional secret. You don't need it to beat the game. Secrets can be as hidden as they like, that's why they're called secrets. Secondly though, there's another old man elsewhere who tells us that there's a secret in the tree at the dead end. Now okay, it's not in the tree, but if it was in the tree it wouldn't be a secret, would it? You're being told there is something secret about this place, and if you explore and experiment a bit, it's reasonable that eventually you'll find this. And like I said, technically you don't need to, that's why it's a secret. Anyway, we're rich now, so it's time to go to level 2, right? No, stop being impatient. Instead, let's follow the coastline for a bit and die to an Octorok. That's a bit embarrassing. Gonna leave it in though, because it makes me look human and fallible, and that might make you like me more as a person. Back to the coastline, where you'll find a flattened, forward-facing section of the mountain wall. I'm going to bomb it, and we're going to go inside and get ourselves another heart container. I know, how the hell are you meant to know where this one is? Again, technically it's a secret, so technically you don't have to. But, actually, if you've been paying attention, you'll come to realise that caves in the overworld can only ever be in a flat wall facing downwards. You'll also come to realise that it's suspicious to have big, open, flat bits of wall. for the reasons I outlined before. Most of the world is rounded off in some fashion so that you don't awkwardly collide with it. You might hear people say, oh what, so I meant to just wander around bombing every wall to try and find secrets? Well, no, because if you know a cave can't be in a non-flat wall and they have to face downwards, that dramatically limits the number of walls there can be a secret in. So yes, you're meant to go around going a bit bomb mad, but it won't take anywhere near as long as you think it will because you've been paying attention. Anyway, now we've got 6 whole heart containers, it's time to go to level 2. Except we're not, because we've got all this money burning a hole in our pocket, so instead, let's go into a shop with the rudest shopkeeper ever and buy an item, the blue candle. This will let us light up dark rooms and was later replaced with the lantern and a litany of other objects that set fire to things because Link has always been a pyromaniac. Alright, on to level 2. No wait, we have a delivery to make. Time to go and hand over a letter to an old lady in a cave who is content to otherwise just sit there by herself saying nothing. But, you know, she seems happy. I can see why that old man's so into her. Clearly she's a fox. Show her the letter and she'll open up a shop selling those potions I told you not to pick up earlier. The red one has 2 uses, and after the first use will turn into the blue one. So you're always going to want to buy the red one, even if you need to go grind some rupees first. These potions will refill literally every heart you have, which is another reason why it'd be stupid to pick them when you could have extra heart containers, and they'll be vital for you later on. Right, now are we going to level 2? No, and I wish you'd stop asking. First we've got some deforestation to do with the power of fire, so let's burn down this tree. Again, yes, it's another secret, and fine, this one is actually a bit obtuse. But later on, you'll get an item that will help you to check multiple trees for burning potential in a very short space of time, so I think this is okay. Remember when I said I don't think this Zelda is the best game ever made, despite it being my favourite? It's because times and attitudes have changed, and these days we're used to secrets and hidden items being at least slightly hinted at. In fact, in the rest of this game, there's a lot of hints to where secrets are, which is why I said you should pay attention. But some of it really is down to just exploration and experimentation. And we've reached a point in generally accepted game design now where, specifically, moments like this aren't what we expect to have happen. That doesn't make them bad as such. They are still optional secrets, they're not that important. It just makes them not usual, and it's the rare moments like this one that lead people to believe that the original Zelda is a confusing, obfuscating mess of random faffery. But, you know, you'll get over it. Since we're burning forestry, let's uncover another couple of cowardly moblins who pay us hush money to not shop them to the Hyrule Secret Police. And now we're flush with bribery money, let's talk about that bow we picked up in level 1. You might notice it doesn't come with any arrows. Like I said, cash rules everything around me, so head into this shop and purchase the right to shoot arrows at things. Now, in a game where cash rules everything around me, where you'll notice a counter for bombs and keys but not one for arrows, what do you imagine your ammo might be for the bow? That's right, money. It costs money to fire arrows. Possibly a very advanced system where an arrow costs 1 rupee and you're just constantly placing Amazon Prime orders. I don't know, but it's yet another reason why we need to keep our pockets full. Alright, one last stop and then I promise we'll get on with level 2. We're going back up into the mountains, where you can, if you want, head into the waterfall and pay this woman to tell you how level 5 works. I don't need to do that, so we won't, and my money is precious, so I'm not going to waste it. But just know that the information is available if you just pay attention, and also pay money. The reason we're up in the mountains is to go to this cave, guarded by a Lionel. You might recognise a Lionel from the Breath of the Wild combo videos that look crazier than Devil May Cry. This is where they started. Inside, an old man tells us that if we master using it, we can have this. What he means is if we get good at using the sword, we can have a better sword. We can have the sword that the game describes as the white sword, which is a white sword with a blue handle. Anyway, what this actually means is we need a certain number of heart containers to be able to possess this white sword with a blue handle, which has no other name than the white sword with a blue handle, and I'm sure this idea will never come up again. You need 5 hearts to obtain the white sword, so we could have done it 2 hearts ago, but we didn't because we had moblins to threaten for cash. There are 2 sword upgrades in The Legend of Zelda, and they both do double the damage of the previous model, so we can throw our stick away now because we have something made of actual metal to stab things with, which is nice. And because we're finally tooled up with the proper weaponry, we can now go to level 2 in the next episode. I am sorry to do this to you, really I am, but I think this has been more than enough to get us going. We've introduced the world, the combat, the puzzle design, and the movement mechanics, and in the next episode, I promise, I give you my word, we will get to level 2. If you like this video, then please like this video and subscribe so you don't miss the next part in this series. I'll see you the next time I'm thinking, hey, let's talk game design.